an interesting part in our nation's history. For the past 200 years, we have been completely torn apart, the North and the South divided. My name is Simon, and I come from the tribe of Simeon that lives in the northern part of Israel. It is here in the north that my family has lived for as long as I can even remember. It is here in the north that Abraham first heard the call from God to get up and go. And it is here in this sacred soil that the bones of our ancestor Jacob has been buried. Now, our nation has a great and amazing and complex story. Some people will say it's like a soap opera. Now, 300 years ago, we had the most amazing experience. We had an opportunity in which we were able to anoint a new king over Israel. Because you must understand that we are people of the promise. We are the people who were called together by our impossibly possible God. We are the people who claim Sarah as our ancestor, who Jacob wrestled with, and how God was able to lead us to the promised land. But unfortunately, over the years, things have begun to fall apart. We have strayed from the promise, and we have unfortunately broken God's heart again and again and again. But 300 years ago, we had this opportunity in which it seemed like all the wrongs were going to be made right, and we were finally going to be on the right track to making God's heart glad. We were going to call David as our king. And this was a glorious time in which the North and the South became one, and they unified. And there was no I, there was no you. It was we, and it was us. And it was bone, and it was flesh. And we entered into a covenant with the king, a covenant with one another, and a covenant with God. And David was being called to not just be our king, but to be a shepherd, to care and to comfort, to watch over and lead, to follow the commands of God and to walk in the Lord's ways. And David, he was a wonderful king, except when he wasn't. There were times when David lied. He coveted, he stealed, he killed, he committed adultery, and some people even accuse him of committing rape. Now, King David was eventually followed by his son Solomon. And Solomon was the king who was led by the wisdom of the Lord, and it was Solomon who built the holy temple in the holy city of David in the southern part of the nation. And Solomon did this amazing thing for the economy. He was able to spend tons of money. He hired tons of people, and he used up tons of resources to build the temple. And the temple was magnificent. It was golden, and it glittered upon the hill, and it was a beacon for all of the people to see. And it was there in the south that we would journey to worship God and to give thanks for all that God had done. Now, I want to be honest with you. As with every nation, not everyone was pleased with their leadership. Those in the south really seemed to enjoy King David and Solomon, but of course, they had the temple and they had all the glory. Those of us in the north, we began to notice how it seemed like King David and Solomon would choose favorites. It turns out there were certain kinds of people they would tax more than others. There were certain kinds of people that they would force into labor more than others. So while those in the south seemed to enjoy having the temple nearby, It was us in the north who seemed to be the ones to be paying for it and doing all the work for it. And then there's that whole issue with Solomon. Solomon, like his father David, kind of had a wandering eye. Not just one woman was enough for him. And not just any kind of woman. He loved exotic women. And not just exotic women, but women who worshiped other gods. So Solomon, to woo them, would end up building temples and shrines for their gods. And then he would go to those temples and shrines and worship those gods with the women he was wooing. Can you imagine that the very man who was responsible for building the temple for the Lord would be the same person who would build temples and shrines to worship other gods? Imagine how that broke God's heart. Well, eventually we get to this place 200 years ago where we are ready to call a brand new king, and it's going to be Solomon's son Rehoboam, but I like to call him Junior because that's a lot easier to remember. So we had our leaders from the north come down to talk to Junior, and they said to Junior, "You know, Junior, we really loved your father, but he worked us really hard, and he had some really harsh punishments for people. He punished people really, really severely. We are coming to you as our new king with a humble request. If you could just respect us and give us some rest, we will follow you forever." So Junior goes to his father's council, and he asks what they should say. And this wise group of leaders say to Junior, "You know, they have come to you out of their kindness. And if you speak good words to them and treat them with compassion, they will be your biggest fans and follow you forever." But Junior ends up going to his drinking buddies, the guys who are working on Wall Street, and he asks them the same question, and his drinking buddies say, "Heck no! There is no way you need to give in to them and show any weakness. You need to tell them that your little finger is bigger than your father's you-know-what. And then you are to tell them that you are going to work them harder and longer and punish them greater than your father ever has." Whose advice do you think Junior took? They had come to him with kindness, and instead he responded by saying he would punish them even greater. And just like that, the north and the south split. And the people from the north turned around and said goodbye, and they took 10 of the tribes with them, and they went back up north, leaving Junior with nothing but the temple in the south and one tribe of God's people. And God's heart broke even more. And it's not like things in the south things in the north were that much better. Because let me tell you what ended up happening in the north. It was time for us to call a brand new king, and we called this guy named Jeroboam, who I like to call Jojo. And Jojo had the most amazing opportunity you could ever imagine. God came to Jojo and said, "If you lead the people with kindness and compassion, and if you follow my commandments, and if you follow my ways, I will give you your heart's desire. And if you listen to my voice, I will build your kingdom bigger than David's, and you will get to be king over all of Israel." Imagine what Jojo did. Jojo somehow got it in his head that if the citizens of the north went down south to worship God in the temple, they would eventually prefer Junior as their king instead. So Jojo built 2 golden calves, And he told all of us in the north that those golden calves were now to be our gods. And those golden calves were actually the ones who delivered us from slavery in Egypt. And he forbid us from going down south to the temple to worship our God. And instead we were forced to worship those two golden calves. And just like that, 1,000 years of our faith was flushed away. Just like that, the king of the north decided that we were to turn our back on our impossibly possible God. That we were to forget the one who created us to be connected to the earth and one another. That we were to forget the one who gave a child to Sarah, forget the one who wrestled with Jacob, and to forget the one who led us into the promised land. And once again, God's heart was broken. So here we are for the past 200 years, a completely divided nation, the north from the south. And we in the north see those in the south as uppity. Those in the south like to call us robbers and rapists. And we ourselves don't even know who we are. We're Jews, but not Jews. We're Gentiles, but not Gentiles. We were insiders, but now we're outsiders, but yet we're still insiders. And we just don't know anymore what's going to happen. However, I will say that there seems to be a new spirit in the air. There seems to be a sense that something good is about to happen, because lately in our northern town, there has been a new prophet who has entered into our area. And this prophet's name is Isaiah. Now, some people like to say that Isaiah is a little out there and his ideas are a little too extreme, but I happen to like this guy, Isaiah. And Isaiah is that kind of person who seems to have his pulse on current events. And currently he's telling people that if we continue as things are, our nation is destined for even worse things to happen. But Isaiah has also given us a glimmer of hope. Because Isaiah has also started talking about someone we have yet to meet. Someone who is to come along. Isaiah has been telling us in our divided nation about an individual named Emmanuel. And Isaiah has been talking about this individual Emmanuel and telling us how God has a plan to take what is left and to bring forth new life. That God is willing to bring forth a new leader, someone who will be filled with wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel and the spirit of might, who is filled with knowledge, who finds delight in the Lord. Isaiah talks about this new individual as someone who is going to care for the poor, someone who is going to watch over the meek and the lowly, and someone who is going to rule with knowledge and understanding and compassion and wisdom, a new kind of leader in which the wolf will lay down with the lamb, and the cows will eat with the bears, and all the children of the world will be safe from harm. A leader in which kindness and goodness and care is bound to cover the earth just as the waters of creation. Imagine such a day. Imagine what kind of peace such a leader would bring to our nation and to our world. Imagine getting to a place in which the wrongs will finally be made right, and the North will be reunified with the South, and God's heart will truly be made glad. Now, I don't know who this Emmanuel is. And I don't know when he is set to arrive. It could be in my lifetime. It could be in the next. but I am willing to wait upon the Lord. For the love of the Lord, I am willing to wait and to trust. Who can this Emmanuel be? And just what will this Emmanuel do? What does our impossibly possible God have in store for us? And can we, this time, do what is right? And can we, this time, do our best to make our hearts glad, our God's heart glad? And for that, I'd like to say, Amen. Amen. Amen.